Somebody came to Mass yesterday dressed as a skeleton. They were a day early. It was a child, don't worry. And I guess tonight there'll be other children dressed as witches and mummies, ghosts and monsters, or maybe even Spider-Man. But we know that underneath that's not what they are. It's an obvious thing to say. But what we wear on the outside doesn't necessarily say anything about what we're like on the inside. And here's me dressed like this. Just because we dress maybe as Christians with crosses or rosary beads or priests as a vestment, it does not mean that we're great disciples or that we're destined for sainthood. And that gospel, of course, makes it clear that what Jesus wants of us is a transformation in our lives that goes way beyond the surface, that goes deep into our hearts and our minds and our souls. And he calls those people blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are persecuted in the cause of right. Blessed are the pure in heart. God wants of us an inner transformation. I'm going to quote something now here that struck me the other day. The church is nothing but a section of humanity in which Christ has truly taken form. And as that can be said of a group of people, it can also be said of us individually, that we're a part of humanity as disciples in which Christ has taken form. That quote came from a German Christian called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a really interesting character. He lived in the beginning of the last century, born in Germany, to parents who were great intellectuals, but not particularly Christian, although he was baptized. But when he was a teenager, he took a great interest in theology and philosophy. And he had a great mind, studied at university, got a doctorate when he was 21. And then he went to America. One of the things he wrote about American college he was in was that their theology wasn't very good because he was from a great rich German tradition. So while he wasn't struck by American theology, something else moved him really deeply. He met a black Baptist pastor and started attending the church there. And he was blown away by the enthusiasm, by the passionate and rapturous preaching, by the wonderful, moving Negro spiritual music. And he kept going. And he attributed those experiences to having opened his eyes and moved his heart. He felt in those moments touched by God's Spirit. He changed from being an intellectual and a theologian into being a disciple. And then he returned to Germany in the 1930s when Hitler was coming to power. Noticed some similarities with the way black people were treated in America and the Jews were being treated in Germany, only to see the situation in Germany get infinitely worse. And he was one of a small group of spiritual leaders, priests, who spoke out against Hitler on the radio, in their writings. And eventually he was arrested and imprisoned. And finally in 1945, before the end of the war, he was hung. He, for me, was a saint, even though he wasn't a Catholic and isn't listed among our lists of saints. But in the way that he lived his life, he was clearly a saint. But you know, when you look at the lives of all the saints, so many of them have got similar things in common. Like men who were soldiers, St. Francis of Assisi, Martin of Tours, St. Ignatius of Loyola, or rich people like Elizabeth of Hungary, who was a princess, Clare of Assisi, who in a moment of their lives were not just touched by the Spirit of God, but were filled by the Spirit of Jesus. And their lives were changed. It was from that moment onwards that they became saintly people. And their lives and this day today are a reminder to us that this is something to which we are all called. You know, and we might think here, and rightly so, I'm no saint. I'm more of a sinner. But the same could be said of every single one of these. They were both sinners and saints, and they remained sinners. But what changed them was that they were filled with the Spirit of God. We can all have that in our lives. We're still going to be sinners, and that's fine, because what we depend on is the grace and mercy of God. But we can also pray that we are filled with the Spirit of God, and that we too can become like the saints in heaven.